This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles McElroon. And John, really quick, I will not spit in your pizza. I'll let you know that.
Oh, Vito, I'm sitting here in tears after rewatching the Victor Martinez celebration for his last game at Comerica Park. How surprised were you that they chose to announce it on a Saturday?
I was surprised. I did not even see that coming. I went to the game. I didn't even know that was going to happen totally, the pregame ceremony of that extent, where they were going to honor him with the players and his family being there instead of on Sunday. And now they've done that twice where I've been involved, Doc, where when they honored the 68 team, the 50th anniversary of the 68 team and celebrated them, that was on a Saturday night, a 6-10 game. Also, this V-Mart pregame celebration at a 6-10 game. But also remember, because of the fact that V-Mart had announced to the masses before Saturday that Saturday would be his final day and game specifically as a major leaguer. And it was great to see him. Miguel Cabrera was there. So V-Mart was honored, was choked up, led to tears from V-Mart. So really, it was great to see this guy, as bad as it sounds, maybe you could take it this way, to see him tear up. I mean, all the feels right there. To see him get emotional and choked up, and to see Salvador Perez and Alcides Escobar, fellow Venezuelans from the KC Royals, come up to him and hug him. When he left the game after his first AB on Saturday night, those guys came out of the dugout, out of the Kansas City Royals dugout, and embraced him and hugged him. That was terrific to see all of his teammates supporting him, embracing him, and his family being there as well for that pregame ceremony. And it was terrific for me to be a part of that ceremony this past Saturday night at Comerica Park.
And it was cool that he stretched out a single there, got on base, and then it was decided, okay, we'll pinch run for you. And pregame, I think you did a great job of staying in the dugout. So they let you basically stay fully in the dugout for the pregame, and you got to see Miggy standing there, took an epic photo. I thought it was really great. And then the photo of Victor Martinez being embraced by his teammates. And I was really surprised that you were basically the only media member taking a photo and kind of showing what it was like just prior to the ceremony. So good job there, and I'm glad that they gave us access to be able to stand in the dugout and take those photos. And what was it like?
Well, I would say, too, I was the only media member that really got the photos and captured them in the moment, because everybody else of the media that I am of the, same magnitude, which is, doing a podcast or writing, those writers are upstairs in the press box still, and they really stay up there in the press box throughout these ceremonies before the games, including during the 68 ceremony. None of those guys like Anthony Fennick of the Free Press, who was on with me to recap V-Mart's career and talk about what he meant to the Tigers, so you can check out that podcast via the DSP network. Well, those guys of that sort, of that magnitude, like Chris McCoskey as well, those guys stay in the press box. So that's why I was able to be really the only one to capture it in real time and get it on social media. Because for those newspapers, they have their photographers on the field. Well, they're not really posting it right away on social media. So that's why I was able to get that almost exclusive access and post it on social media before anybody else did. Or really be the only guy that did.
No, I
like
see,
you said.
Yeah, I see the workflow too. You get the info from the clubhouse, you get all your audio, and then you go back and listen to it. And then get your pregame article up to your site and things like that. And so, yeah, going forward, I do think we have some tweaks we will make in terms of just adding a little bit of, add it to social media, but also at the same time take a bunch of other photos and add it to the website as well to draw attention to the website, because that's what it's about. It's about drawing attention to the site, our Twitter page, and our podcast. But like I said, I'm very impressed with what we did. I'm impressed that we provided something a little bit different than anybody else and that we were able to. And you did a really good job in the handful of games that you attended. And next year should provide us another great opportunity to be covering the Detroit Tigers in the press box as credentialed media. And I really had a good time with it. Unfortunately, the play on the field, the last series, not that great.
No, it was not at all.
And you looked at it and you said, well, they're playing out the string. Once the trade happened once the Tigers sent Mike Fiers away from the Tigers, that kind of was the white flag. And from then on, it just, you had a handful of games where the Tigers looked good, but in the end, the Tigers basically played out the stretch. What happened last week?
Well, you know what? They didn't look that great against KC, but KC's a team, too, that, wasn't looking really good coming into that series. So still, I don't know how you would describe it or if you would label it as a letdown. I don't think it was a complete letdown how they fared against the KC Royals. But, yeah, I mean, the club just down the stretch hasn't been nearly good enough. But they're not contending. They're not competing for anything. And I don't want to say they mailed it in because I think these Tigers still have tried hard and, gave a valiant effort. And they had a 4-game set, with the Royals. So they still split with them. Took 2 out of 4 in that series at Comerica against KC. And that was the final home series of the 2018 campaign. Now they're in Minnesota for a 3-game set, and then they finish out the season with 3 games in Milwaukee. And could they spurn Milwaukee of making the playoffs? Maybe they spoil Milwaukee's playoff chances. That could happen in the final weekend of the season, Doc.
Some of the important news was Gardenhire came out in the media and said, hey, we still want to play game in, game out. We want to make the hustle plays. And a player that you wouldn't expect to kind of let up a little bit was Jordan Zimmermann, and there was a play in which he was supposed to cover first base, and he kind of lackadaisically kind of walked over there, and Gardenhire said, look, I'm not, he kind of prefaced it by saying, some people may not like me talking about it in the press, but I've already talked about it with Jordan Zimmermann that, hey, you got to hustle. You got to get out there and do your job. And Jordan acknowledged that he kind of loafed a little bit and things like that, but Gardenhire does not want the team to basically quit. Now, they haven't, but there have been so many at-bats where it looks like towards the tail end of the season, just, what you call like a throwaway at-bat, just swinging at anything. And I think the theme of the last couple days, the last 10 days, is probably plate discipline, which means don't swing at awful pitches. Don't just go up there hacking and, not trying to get on base. And it kind of had a feel in the last couple games that I went to offensively that the Tigers just went up there and were just like not paying attention to signs. They were kind of, going up there and just swinging at anything, trying to, just get a hit and trying to do whatever. But Gardenhire said, no, you got to pay attention to your signs. If there's a take sign, that is a legitimate order not to swing. And these guys, on a couple of occasions in the last 10 days, have missed signs or just been oblivious to them. And he came out and said, look, that's unacceptable. That can't happen, especially on a major league team. You can't just disobey a sign, especially from one of your coaches.
Well, yeah, and you see these guys lacking plate discipline hugely. Them striking out, just swinging, just wailing at pitches in the dirt, too. Way outside of the strike zone, not even close to in the strike zone. Jim Ducey in the final AB of Sunday's game in that 1-run loss to the Royals, he was swinging, wailing, and he had a nice at-bat, but still striking out in the end. Jacoby Jones strikes out in the end all the time, it seems like. He strikes out far too often. And he's still top 5 in WAR for the Tigers. That's how bad the Tigers have been collectively this season. And they've dealt some guys like Mike Fiers and didn't have the greatest team and collection of talent coming into this campaign. But still, when Jacoby Jones is in your top 5 for best players in terms of WAR, according to Baseball Reference, this late into the season, when he's a guy that just wails at pitches and lacks plate discipline extremely, that says a lot about your team and the lack of talent and the lack of success you've had as a ball club as a whole, throughout the whole entire season, is what I'm trying to say. So Jones, he lacks a plate discipline. Kristen Stewart, what I like about him right now, Doc, is that he will walk. Now, will he K? Yeah. But he's a power hitter. Those power hitters, they do K. Good thing is, he does have a good eye. A much better eye than a guy like Jacoby Jones, who I don't know if he has a future next year. And you brought up Jordan Zimmermann not going over to first base quick enough to cover first base. Guess what? You got to do that. That's a simplistic aspect of the game that you learn in Little League ball. In high school ball, you should know that by then. And you go over there and cover first base. So you hustle and you show the effort by going over there to cover first base. That's part of your duty as a pitcher, to know that and to do that. He didn't execute that, and he looked lazy on that play. And you know what? Overall-wise for Jay Zim this year, better than last year, better maybe than in years past. But when he does that, and when you still look at his results collectively, he's still not what he should be for all the money that he's making. And then when he's lazy on a play and he's making all that money, it even looks more like an albatross of a contract. And it means we can critique and criticize him even more as well, Doc. And there's been a lot of Tigers to criticize this season, obviously. And maybe that lack of plate discipline at times, and really a lot of times, and Also, the effort level has led to the Tigers being a team that loses a lot of one-run games. How about their record in one-run games? They've played in 51-run games this season, up to this point, going into Tuesday night's game at Minnesota, Doc. And they are 22-28 in those one-run games. Had one on Sunday, too, losing 3-2, and they threatened, had a chance to score, maybe to tie it up, didn't do so in the ninth. So they fell to 22-28 in one-run games. How about that stat right there? And a little tease for what will be featured in Vito's notebook this week.
Vito, who's the guest this week? I think you have somebody that's definitely tuned into the minor league system and somebody that is able to look at talent and evaluate strongly.
Jim Callis, senior writer for MLBpipeline.com. So he'll be joining us on this week's episode of Tigers Talk via Vito's VIP line, which I haven't had the chance to say a lot lately, it seems like, saying that somebody's joining me via Vito's VIP line.
What are you interested in getting from him?
What does he think about Kristen Stewart, the Tigers' position player talent in the farm system, and the overall state of the Tigers' farm system heading into the 2019 campaign? All of that and more with Jim Callis of MLBpipeline.com after the break. And Doc, as you know, one of our fine partners at the DSP network is the Detroit Sports Commission, which has been bringing tons and thousands of international amateur sporting events and national amateur sporting events and sporting events collectively since 2001. And to find out about all of the events that the Detroit Sports Commission is bringing to our very region, that is the Metro Detroit area, please follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their hugely terrific website at DetroitSports.org. And it is MLB Pipeline senior writer Jim Callis joining us on this week's episode of Tigers Talk via Vito's VIP line. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Vito. How are you doing?
Very good. And let's get right into a lot of news and notes to discuss regarding the Tigers farm system. And I want to get your thoughts aplenty regarding it. But first and foremost, Jim, I want to get from you your decision regarding placing 21-year-old right-hander Casey Mize, number 9, on your list of top 10 prospects entering 2019. What was the reason, Jim, behind that?
Well, it was actually, just to clarify, I mean, he'll rank pretty high too, but it was my projection on who would be in our top 10 at the end of 2019. We always kind of take a look ahead, and factor in who's going to graduate. I mean, he's still going to rank not too far outside the top 10, I think, going into the season. But I mean, I've said this a bunch of times, and obviously Casey Mize was in the news a lot leading up to the draft and after he went number 1 overall. But you just don't see a guy with his combination of stuff and command. I thought his splitter might be the most unhittable pitch in last year's draft. And oh, by the way, he's got a 92, 97 mile an hour fastball with good run on it. And he's got a hard slider that became a plus pitch. And he commands them all well. Like, it's usually hard to command the splitter. I mean, his dives, it has a lot of life. His fastball has a lot of life. But he throws not just strikes, but quality strikes. I just think that combination of stuff and ability to locate it made it, that was the reason the Tigers took him number 1 overall, and that's the reason why he's so highly regarded.
So by the end of 2019, could be a top 10 prospect indeed, and has all this talent, all this upside. Now, Jim, what do you project him to be in the Tigers' rotation in the long-term future? An ace caliber arm, middle of the rotation guy? What do you project him to be?
Yeah, I see him as a frontline starter, to be honest with you. Again, I just think you see guys who have really good pure stuff, and you see guys sometimes who have really good command, but you rarely see a guy who has both of those things. And I just think, he's a pitcher, so you got to keep him healthy, which isn't always easy. But and he's had health questions in the past, although not in the last year. But if he stays healthy, I think he's a frontline starter.
When do you think he could reach the big leagues by?
I think a lot of that depends. I mean, you see how much service time plays a role in stuff. I think a lot of that depends on the Tigers. I mean, could he hold his own by the end of next year? Yeah, I think he could, because again, he's got stuff and command, and I guess my guess is he's going to start the year in Double-A. But they, I don't think the Tigers are going to contend, and there's no real reason to get a service time clock started. So while I think he could probably handle it by the end of next year, I think we're probably looking at sometime in 2020.
So moving from from pitching to positional player prospect stuff and to Kristen Stewart specifically, and this corner outfielder, left fielder, power hitting left fielder who's done all right so far with the Tigers in this big league stint and had a 2-home run, 6 RBI game already this season against the Royals. And do you think he has long-term staying power with the Tigers? And what do you project him to be at the major league level, Jim?
I do. I think he's a big league regular. I think it's interesting. He kind of is what he is, and he's been that guy since he was at Tennessee and was a first-round pick. I mean, Christin Stewart's going to do two things. He's going to hit home runs. I think he's hit something like 83 homers in the last 3 years in the minor leagues. Hit 2 the other night against the Royals. And he draws walks. I mean, he does that everywhere. Now, he has cut down the strikeouts some this year, but he's never going to be a guy who's probably going to hit for a real high average. And he's not much of a runner or thrower or athlete. So, I mean, it's pretty much a power and walks guy. But, I mean, that's valuable. I mean, this is a guy who potentially could be like a 25 homer, 75 walk guy at the big league level, healthy on base percentage, even if he hits around 250, 260. So, I mean, I think, for the Tigers, I mean, you've got some time to figure out, is he, I think he's more than a second division regular. I think he can play he could be a regular on a playoff caliber team. I think the question just is, how high in the batting order is he going to bat? And I think you're still trying to figure that out. Is he going to be a guy who bats fifth or sixth, or maybe does he bat a little bit higher than that? But I mean, his track record's been pretty consistent. This guy's going to hit for power and he's going to draw walks.
Sure, and it's just about whether or not he's really that cleanup hitter, right? And the guy that can carry your offense. And I don't think he will, but I think he still will hit for power. I mean, that's what he projects to do, and that's what he's done all his minor league career already, as you stated yourself too, Jim.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he is what he, like I said. I mean, I don't think he's surprised the Tigers at all. I mean, he's lived up to the scouting reports he had as an amateur.
Yeah, hitting for power and drawing walks. And now Kristen Stewart, there is some excitement with him, what he can become. But who is the most exciting positional player prospect for the Tigers right now, in your opinion?
I'll give you a couple answers. I mean, if you're looking at who the best position prospect is, I mean, I think based on track record and how far he's progressed, I mean, you could probably argue Kristen Stewart. I mean, if you're talking about most exciting upside, I'd say it'd be Parker Meadows, who was a second-round pick of the Tigers in this year's draft, the younger brother of Austin Meadows. Now, I mean, he's a big guy, so the swing gets long. There's going to be some questions about his, ability to make consistent contact. He had a decent debut. The strikeout rate was a little bit high. But, I mean, this guy's exciting. I mean, he has a chance to hit for a lot of power. I mean, he's got bat speed and a lot of leverage and projectable strength in his athletic frame. He's made some adjustments to his swing, which helped him. This year's has helped him make a little bit more contact. And, I mean, he can really run. He's got a solid arm. I think he's got a chance to play center. He can do a lot of things. So I think Parker Meadows is a guy who can do a lot of things. And, I mean, another guy who I'd kind of throw his hat in the ring is maybe being the best position prospect. Maybe not most exciting, but the guy who could be the best position prospect when all is said and done, because I think he's got a better chance to hit. And I think he's going to have, some decent power, too. And he plays premium position as Isaac Paredes, who they got last year in the Justin Wilson, Alex Avila trade a year ago with the Cubs. I mean, this is a guy who's a line drive hitter. I think he could be a 15-home run guy. And he's got a chance to play decent shortstop and can maybe bounce all over the infield. So he's really interesting, too.
How about Daz Cameron? What do you expect from him?
Yeah, I think Cameron's kind of in that group also. I think with Daz, Daz got a little overhyped, I shouldn't say that. He got hyped a lot when he was a high school sophomore, and I think everybody expected he's going to be this number one overall pick when he was a senior in 2015. And I don't know if he really progressed exactly how people thought. I think Daz is a guy. I mean, he's going to play in the big leagues. I think the question is how much offense are you going to get out of him? I mean, I think he can. Offensively, he's kind of decent across the board. He hits for decent average. I think he's probably more of like a 260 hitter. He draws a decent amount of walks. He controls the strike zone decently. I mean, he's going to have a decent on-base percentage. It's probably, 10, 12, 15 home run power. I don't think there's a huge offensive impact. Now, the rest of the game's pretty good. He's got really good instincts. His solid speed plays above that on the bases. It plays above that in center field. He throws well. So I think you're looking at a guy whose primary value is going to come, or I should say primary, I think he's going to maybe give you, stand out more defensively and be a decent hitter. I mean, This is not a great comparison, but just kind of a parallel maybe to a Jackie Bradley Jr. with the Red Sox. Now, I think Jackie Bradley Jr. might be the best defensive outfielder in baseball, or he's one of them. But, Jackie, I think Daz will hit for a little bit more average, a little less power. But again, Jackie Bradley Jr., is so good defensively, and he's a decent offensive player, and I think that's kind of what Daz Cameron's going to be.
And it is Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline on Tigers Talk with me this week. And, it seems like for ages, since I was only a day old, that the Tigers have lacked positional player prospects. Where do you think the Tigers stand as a farm system with their positional player talent at this point?
I think it gets overshadowed because I know on our list in particular, we always tweet the list, but our list, starts off with the 5 pitchers, Mize, Perez, Manning, Faedo, Burrows. But, I actually think they've got some decent position player depth. And we've talked about Stewart. He's hit all the way up to the big leagues. Meadows has got a ceiling. Cameron's an up-the-middle player. Willie Castro's a guy they picked up who's interesting. I really like Paredes. Jake Rogers, the bat's inconsistent, but he's a really good defender, and he's got pop. Cody Clemens had a big year. So he's interesting, too. So I think they've got some position players in the system. I don't think it's barren. But, I think their system, to me, the pitching does stand out. If I was, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, I'm not going to claim I've lined up all the systems, but if I was breaking down the best pitching farm systems, they'd probably be in the top 5 or 6 because they're top-heavy with those guys. In terms of position players, I think they'd be more kind of, and this is just off the top of my head, maybe in that 15 to 20 range. That might be a little light. I don't think it's bad. I just think they're kind of middle of the pack position player-wise. And overall, the farm system, I don't know if I'd quite put them in the top 10, but they're not far off, I don't think.
Yeah, so would you say middle of the pack then, the Tigers farm system as a whole, what it stands at right now?
Yeah, again, it's hard because I haven't lined them all up recently, but in my mind, off the top of my head, they kind of fit like maybe in that 11 to 15 range for me.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking right now, the Tigers, and they just have to beef up the farm system, continue doing so. They're going to have a nice draft pick in next year's amateur draft and keep collecting talent throughout these future amateur drafts. And Dawel Lugo, I want to bring up really quick. Now, he's had a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever you want to say regarding his stint with the Tigers so far, and it hasn't been too appeasing. OPS below 700 in the minors, and he was a prize trade piece in the JD Martinez deal with the Diamondbacks. Do you think he has any long-term staying power in the big leagues?
I think he's more of a utility guy for me. They've made a lot of nice moves. The Tigers have. I think they've drafted well. They've been aggressive with trades. I didn't love the JD Martinez trade. I know he was going to be free agent, so he didn't have a lot of leverage. I didn't think they got really a prime guy coming back for JD. And again, I know their leverage is limited. To me, Lugo's like a utility type at best, to be honest. I just don't see a standout tool. His best tool, honestly, is probably his arm, which is not, what you're looking for necessarily with a position player, that the best tool is his arm. He's just kind of, I just don't think there's a lot of impact with the bat. There's not a ton of power. He's not a high average guy. He almost never walks. So I think you're looking at a below average offensive profile, and, the arm's big, but he's not particularly quick. So I think shortstop's kind of a stretch. I just don't love the profile on Dawel Lugo.
So, Jim, he's not even a Jose Iglesias caliber middle infielder. That's what I think, at least. And it sounds like based on your projection and what you see from him, he's not even that kind of player.
No, the difference between him and Jose Iglesias is a much, much, much better defensive player. Jose Iglesias is a quality shortstop. Now, offensively, yes, I think you're talking about the same offensive profile roughly. That's not a bad call at all. Iglesias, I think, has a little bit better contact skills, and it's not great plate discipline, but it's probably a little bit better than Lugo's, and he probably is a little quicker. But overall, you're talking about, similar offensive profile, but defensively, I don't think there's any comparison, and I just don't think you can play Lugo as shortstop at the big league level. So that's where the difference is. Yes, bat-wise, they're comparable, but Iglesias just crushes him with the glove.
And, Jim, I like Jeimer Candelario at third base. Now, I don't think he'll be an all-star year in, year out, but I like the fact that he can draw a walk, get on base. What do you project from him moving forward?
Yeah, I've always been a Candelaria fan, and I know he didn't have a great year, but there were some positives. I mean, I think he'll hit for a higher average, to be honest with you. I mean, he needs to make a little, more consistent contact. But like you point out, I mean, he draws walks. He's going to hit, I think he's at 19 or 20 homers right now. I think he can still get a little bit better. He's a switch hitter. I mean, he hit in the minor leagues, so I like him. I think. You're still trying to figure out, is he a first division regular? Is he a second division regular? I think he's a little bit better defensively than people thought this year. So, I mean, it's going to sound funny. I mean, but the 226, that part wasn't great. But I think, I think Jeimer Candelario fits somewhere between the 330 he hit in his brief time with the Tigers last year and the 230 or so he's hitting this year. I mean, I think this is a guy who could hit 270 with 20-plus homers playing every day. I do like him. I thought that was a nice pickup. To get him and Paredes from the Cubs for Wilson and Avila, I thought was a really nice move.
Yeah.
Really nice move for the Tigers.
Yeah, the Tigers won that deal big time. I mean, even now, looking at what that became for the Cubs, Justin Wilson, okay, he's been all right. Alex Avila now with the D-backs. He struggled with the Cubs last year down the stretch, has struggled with the D-backs. So the Tigers won that deal big time, in my opinion, Jim. And I'll let you go with this question. Who do you think is the Tigers' most under-the-radar prospect, and really best under-the-radar prospect at this point?
Think about this for a second.
Yeah, I'll let you wait and think about it. I know I put you on the hot seat.
I'll throw out a couple guys.
Okay.
Various level. I'll give you kind of three guys. I've always liked Logan Shore, who they just got as the player to be named to the Mike Fiers trade. And I know he didn't have a great year, but he was on the University of Florida's 2016 pitching staff was crazy. They had 5 first-round picks on that staff, 5 eventual first-round picks. They have 8 or 9 guys who might wind up being starting pitchers in the big leagues. It was a crazy staff, and he was the best pitcher, not necessarily the best stuff, but the best pitcher. Been up and down a little bit, had some minor physical ailments in pro ball. But I like Logan Shore. I think I'll bet on Logan Shore becoming a number 4 starter, maybe even a little bit better. Another guy who I've always kind of liked, because I have great respect for the program. He's not a high-ceiling guy. He's been lit up in a couple of big league appearances. But Matt Hall misses bats with his curveball, and I think there's a future. I know he's been getting crushed in his couple brief appearances. I like Matt Hall as a situational reliever. Just always really respected the way he goes after it. Missouri State has a real good track record of pitching. And then kind of a sleeper, and he might be more of a 4th outfielder, but a guy who's got some tools. Troy Montgomery, who they got in the Ian Kinsler trade, I guess with the Angels. Montgomery can do a lot of different things. I mean, he can run, he can throw, he can play the outfield, he can hit. I think he's got a little bit more pop than he showed. I don't think Troy Montgomery is going to be a star by any means, but I think Troy Montgomery can be a useful 4th outfielder in the big leagues.
Hey, Jim Callis, thanks for all the time, man. Great insight, great feedback, and really appreciate all the time that you spent with us on this week's episode of Tigers Talk.
Hey, great talking to you, Vito.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and that was Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline, senior writer for MLB Pipeline, and he's covered the landscape of prospects and minor league systems forever now, Jim Callis has. So he's an expert. He's an expert on prospects, on minor league systems, and he described the Tigers' minor league system right now as middle of the pack, which is good for them. Remember where it came from, where it was at one point? Bottom of the league, really? I mean, really towards the bottom of the league if it wasn't dead last among the 30 Major League Baseball clubs. So now it's from, he said, like the 11 or 12 to 15 range, which is good for the Tigers, and now they just got to keep making progress, Doc. And what did you think of what Jim had to share with us, and what did you gather from my chat with them?
Very interesting, his thoughts regarding Casey Mize, Lugo, some of the prospects and things like that. Obviously, a lot of people paid attention to the Mike Fiers trade, what the Tigers got back in return, and I think that it gives us a little bit of hope that, in terms of what the Tigers' needs are, we all know it's positional players, and that there are a couple that maybe have an opportunity. But in the end, when you look at the minor league system, it's just hard to predict what's going to happen when you get called up to the big league. Some guys just get called up and they handle their business. Others, it's too big a moment for them. And so now, in the coming years, 2019, 2020, maybe 2020 will be the debut of Casey Mize. We will get a chance to see what these guys do, because it's about time they're going to be called up, and they'll be called upon to contribute to the Tigers. And we'll see, basically, I'm excited to kind of see who's going to contribute, who's going to step up, who's going to make up the roster in the next coming 2 or 3 years, because those will be the guys that we'll be interviewing and we'll be talking to. And definitely this offseason, I'm interested in who the Tigers are going to keep. What kind of trades are they going to make? What does the future hold for guys like Nick Castellanos and Jose Iglesias? what can they get out of Jordan Zimmermann, what's going to happen with Daniel Norris, some of the pitchers. And so it'll be a fascinating offseason, and one in which we'll be here every single Wednesday breaking it down and having great guests and great conversations talking baseball.
We haven't stopped recording yet. We haven't gotten tired. As I say on Two Bad Hombres, we're never tired. We can't be tired, and we won't stop delivering Tigers content on a weekly basis on Wednesdays via this Tigers Talk platform. So a good interview there with Jim Callis, all about the Tigers prospects and farm system as a whole and where it stands at right now. So that was good. And before I get into my Tigers notebook, which I think will be good and tasty for all you guys out there as well to listen to, I just got a notification that I'm getting paid by the Detroit Free Press. So making this day even greater. Finally getting paid by the Free Press. So good to hear with that. And now, how about this? Vitos Notebook. A couple of news and notes regarding the Tigers before we end this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And I already brought up their stat in one-run games, 22 and 28 and 51-run games up to this point in the campaign. Now, here's one about Daniel Norris. In each of left-hander Daniel Norris's last 7 starts, including Sunday's outing against the Kansas City Royals, he hasn't gotten through more than 5 1/3 innings. Now, on Sunday, in a 3-2 loss, it was for the Royals in the Tigers' 2018 home finale. Norris went 5 innings, by the way, guys, and allowed a 1 run on 6 hits. With the Tigers' loss to the Royals Sunday, Ron Gardenhire and company finished 38 and 43 at home in 2018 and were outscored by their opponents by 33 runs, 363 to 330. In stark contrast, in 2016, the last time the Tigers finished a season above 500 at 86 and 75, they finished 45 and 35 and outscored their opponents at home 381 to 357. And I'll give you 2 more. For sure, one more. Here we go. James McCann. He has continued to struggle at the plate as the season has wound down. Over the 28-year-old backstops, the last 25 games and 93 at-bats. He has batted a measly $172 with 2 home runs, 4 runs batted in, and a lowly .464 on base plus slugging percentage. He is on pace for his worst OPS of his big league career in a season in which he's played at least 105 games. Now, his OPS right now, 569. Yeah, below 600 at 569. That's below minor league good. And that's through 114 games and 412 at-bats. And now really quick, to round out this week's Vitos Notebook, I want to bring up something regarding Kristen Stewart. He hit 2 home runs September 20th against the Royals, drove in 6 runs. Now, he was the first Tigers player to slug his first 2 Major League home runs in the same game since outfielder, I don't even know if you remember this guy, Brent Cleveland. I think it was Cleveland how you said his last name. And he did so August 1st of 2006 against the then Tampa Bay Devil Rays. That's how long it's been. And then in the same game, once again, Stewart, this, left-handed slugger, recorded 6 runs batted in. And in doing so, becoming the first Tiger since at least 1908 to have a 6-RBI performance within the first 11 games of his Major League Baseball career. And that stat coming to you from the Tigers Media Relations Department's Twitter handle at Detroit Tigers PR. So that rounds out Vito's Notebook for this week on Tigers Talk. And with that being said, great stuff once again from Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline. Much thanks to him for all his insight, all his time in this week's episode of the podcast. And thanks to Doc for always being my sidekick and partner in fun and crime. Doc, any final comments here as we finish this week's Tigers Talk?
It'll be interesting going forward to see how the Tigers respond to the last week of the season. Obviously, we give them credit. They didn't lose 100 games. Many people predicted that they would. But in the end, this season was kind of a lost season, a season in which you kind of now basically started to sell off the pieces, and now everybody's going to be peeking into the minor league system, what's going to happen in 2019. I'm excited to see how this goes going forward and to work with you in preparing our coverage for the 2019 season, because really in the end, not a lot of things are going to be successful on the field per se in 2019, but I do think that there's going to be opportunities to see great moments, great players starting to emerge for the organization. And again, rebuilds take time, maybe in the upwards of 3, 4, 5 seasons. But in year 2, we're definitely going to want to see how the Tigers handle maybe a top 10 pick, how they're going to handle going forward with Al Avila, and deciding on some of the prospects in the minor league systems. Who's going to be called up? Who's going to have a chance to stick around? And for me, I want to see how the organization views the likes of a Dawel Lugo, the likes of a Jacoby Jones, what they're going to do with Castellanos. I want to definitely peek into some of the relievers, and maybe do the Tigers finally address some more of that bullpen, because
it stinks. It still stinks, right?
Still not the best, still not effective.
Another top 10 pick coming for the Tigers in the 2019 Major League Baseball Amateur Draft, so watch out for that. Some intriguing prospects, guys on the rise, such as Isaac Paredes. So we got to check out them in coming seasons, and we look forward to that and future editions of Tigers Talk as well. And with that, I am signing off for this week's episode. Great stuff from Jim Callis. Great fun with all of you listening, and keep listening. Keep listening to us all off-season long, and follow me at Vito Drum, and follow the podcast network at Detroit Podcast on Twitter. Thank you much. Have a great week, and adios.